But what about for a new lifter who, what would be your 1 year programming advice for a new lifter who, okay, just Bromley, just give me a plan on what to do and I'll follow to a T. What does that path look like?
That's a good question. I'm a little torn here. I almost always default to a linear progression. The biggest problem with the new lifter isn't actually recovery ability or balancing the training on the head of a pin. The wisdom goes, new lifters can do anything and grow. A new lifter can bounce their head against a wall, and just the sheer effort from not sitting on the couch will make them stronger in some capacity. So that's both a superpower, but it's also the kryptonite, because it leads people to believe that whatever they did in the beginning that worked is somehow a meaningful text of the vital principles that they should be following. It's like, I figured it out. Everybody thinks 6 months in, they figured it out. Training is easy. Getting strong is easy. I put 100 pounds on my bench in 10 months. It's like, well, you couldn't bench the bar when you started. So of course you did. If you go pick up a construction job, you're going to get the same thing. So that's where what the person is likely to do well and commit themselves to is going to be a big asset. Also, what do they need to learn now that's going to help them down the road? So generally, I bias towards a linear progression because you get a lot of practice. So something like Grayscale LP is one of my favorite. Shout out to Johnny Payne. I read his blog like 10 years ago when it was still on, but it's like a modification of starting strength. Basically, it's starting strength, but there's the frequency is a little different. There's an AMRAP at the end. I really like AMRAPs for growth. I love as a way to test yourself every time, keep your capacity up, challenge your pain threshold. And if you're really motivated, it's like you can almost always get out that one extra rep, especially on something like a squat. So it practices the same lifts, so you get a lot of skill work. Lifters can get their lifts, new lifters can get their lifts passable really, really fast, as long as they're able to practice it a lot. The clear method of progression, it's hard to screw up. You do today's work, doesn't matter if it's easy or hard. Do today's work, next week, add 5 pounds. That's it. Very sustainable. Teaches you how to stick to a schedule. Very valuable. And I can write it on a cocktail napkin. I can tell somebody to do this if they've never lifted, and in 6 months, they're going to be stronger. Period. End of story. However, there's another school of thought. There's something else that's relevant to that, and that is variety. It reminds me of youth sports. Any coach who deals with young football players have to deal with specialization versus getting a wide base. So think of it as Tiger Woods' dad making him just swing a golf club thousands of hours, because that's what he's going to be. That's what he's going to do well at. There's a lot of psycho parents that think that's the best way to get their kid to be the next big thing. And it's not. Most people in youth sports recognize that variety, building a base, playing multiple different sports, getting a wide variety of skill sets. Even the Russians, the Soviets knew this. You prioritize play with the youth. So it's foundational to sports is that you get a wide base, you do a wide variety of things. And that looks like bodybuilding training. It looks like body weight stuff, calisthenic stuff, some barbell stuff, isolation work, machines, regular activity. And what that does is that gives you the tools you need. It widens your base. It's kind of a theme that I talk about regularly, so that when you do specialize down the road, you're more efficient. If you are more well-rounded out, if the smaller muscle groups are taken care of, if you're comfortable in different positions, if you can conceptualize what your body is doing better when you're doing certain moves, you can be more efficient and generate more force in a particular lift. Whereas if you start with that, you have to measure how the specialization develops you in these other areas, and it doesn't quite as well. So that's a problem. So yeah, there's this balance between, is it better to have new lifters start out with a wide variety of work and then chisel down to a point as they get further along, or should they start with the basics and get that down? And again, everything works, so it's kind of hard to say. I think if everybody started their first 2 years bodybuilding, ideally in a perfect world, I think that would probably be closer to ideal. Boris Shako, who I talked about, very specialized power. His power lifters do some variation of squat, bench, dead multiple times per week, and that's about it. There's a little bit of accessory at the end, but they train the way Olympic lifters train, very specialized. Olympic lifter or Boris Shako's novice routine has lunges, step-ups, push-ups, dumbbell curls, machine benching. It has a whole variety of stuff for that specific reason. So anyways, I know I just took a simple question and complicated the shit out of it, but it's like two things have to be true. A new lifter has to be able to get a handle on the main lifts very quickly and learn how to progress evenly, but they also need to be well-rounded. So there's a lot of value in what I would call play. It's just knowing that that is part of that state. And eventually your goal is to grow out of that and start specializing. And how that happens, the order that happens in is not entirely clear, and it's not easy to communicate.
So then are you saying, for example, in the first year, you should spend 6 months doing Great Skull and then 6 months doing bodybuilding?
I would probably take a more, again, perfect scenario, because this isn't exactly what I recommend to people. In a hypothetical where I had domain over all my lifters and I could correct all their shit, hypothetically, I would have them on a simple progression for a main barbell lift, and then I would probably have them follow it up with a robust amount of body weight or bodybuilding type work. That doesn't necessarily mean they need to do 12 exercises a workout, although there's value to that. That's what I did when I started training. There was value in that. So measuring better or worse is hard. But then if you talk to somebody like Jim Wendler, who does a lot of stuff on training the youth, it's not that complicated. And the truth is it's not, and it doesn't have to be. So measuring those trade-offs is a bit hard, but I would start out with a linear progression on a main barbell lift, follow it up with a robust amount of what you would call play, getting comfortable with different machines in the gym, getting comfortable with dumbbell movements, learning how to be a little bit in balance, how to coordinate your body, something that would look like kind of a watered down bodybuilding split. And I think that would be appropriate. And you learn how to use those to get your biceps bigger. You have to learn how to get smaller muscles bigger as well, because when you plateau as a lifter and you're just using the bench to grow your upper body, the bench does a shit job at a point of growing your upper body. How am I going to get my triceps stronger? How am I going to, increase thickness of my pecs? My front delts suck. They're not contributing to my bench. How do I get those up? That's a very, very useful thing to have even for a specialized lifter. And it's easier to get comfortable with that when you're young. So yeah, generally I would advocate some amount of variety, some volume of isolation work, and varied modes of training early on in training.